the News Channel 5 network, this is Open Line.
Good Thursday evening, everyone. I'm Rhori Johnston, sitting in the Open Line chair tonight here on News Channel 5 Plus. We invite you to call in with your comments and questions as we tackle the topic tonight of what is the timeline for a potential coronavirus vaccine. Boy, we'd all like to know that. We would love to have a vaccine now and an effective vaccine and get this over with, but unfortunately that is not reality. It takes much longer than that, and we're going to find out more from an expert tonight. So again, what is the timeline for a COVID-19 or coronavirus vaccine? I can tell you this. Research, we're told, is happening at a breakneck speed. About 80 groups around the world are researching vaccines. Some are now entering clinical trials, and we have a local expert here with some information to share with us, and we're pleased he is taking the time to join us tonight, and it is Dr. James Hildreth. He is the president of Meharry Medical College. Dr. Hildreth, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be with you tonight.
Listen, I was just telling our audience about progress that is now being made around the world, and this certainly is different. There is certainly some urgency surrounding this, given how widespread this pandemic has been. But what I'm reading is about 80 groups around the world are researching vaccines, some entering clinical trials. The first human trial data appears positive. What do you know about it?
You're absolutely right. Actually, there's almost 100 groups that are working on vaccines. Some of them are still in the preclinical phase, where you do studies in animals like mice and monkeys. Some of them, as you say, have entered into human trials. Normally, vaccines and drugs are developed in stages. There's a preclinical stage, clinical stage, and the clinical stage is divided into phases, phase 1, 2, and 3. And in some cases, they're actually doing some of the phases in parallel. Phase 1, which normally has 20 to 100 people in it. Phase 2 can have many hundreds in it. And in some of the cases, the data have been so promising that they're doing some of the phases in parallel, which is really unprecedented. But it just speaks to the urgency of getting a vaccine as quickly as possible. But I've been saying to people, we need to understand that vaccines can take decades to produce. The fastest one we know of is Ebola. That took 6 or 7 years. So we think this is going to be a lot faster than that. But I think we have to be realistic and understand that it's not going to be probably in 2020. It's probably a 2021 event of having a vaccine.
That raises the question for the layperson out there, why does it take a typical vaccine so long to come to market? Is it just because of, well, obviously I'm sure there are so many different variables involved, but is it too much government oversight, too much regulation and blockages, or is it other things? Is it just research and development is what it is?
Well, I think the first thing you have to understand is we have to know something about the biology of the virus and how the immune system responds to it. There are really two major ways that our immune system deals with viruses. One are the antibodies that we've all heard about. These are soluble proteins that latch onto a virus and kind of tag it for destruction. Some of the antibodies also interfere with the ability of the virus to bind to cells, and we call those neutralizing antibodies. But there's also another arm of the immune system that are T cells. They're cells in our bodies that are programmed to identify and kill virus-infected cells. And if you think about it, the virus-infected cells are kind of like the virus factory. So we want to be able to get rid of those as well. So for some viruses, we need both antibody response and a T cell response. So a lot of times it takes us a little while to identify what is the most effective immune response to a virus. Now, thankfully, it's starting to look like neutralizing antibodies might be sufficient for the COVID-19 virus, but we're not sure of that yet. So part of the delay in making a vaccine is really trying to understand the biology of it. And then you have to identify what is the right thing to use for a vaccine. And in this case, people are using genetic material. They're using pieces of the virus, proteins. They're using whole viruses that have been inactivated. And we never know which of those things truly will give us the best response. So it's a kind of an iterative process. You try something, you change it a little bit, you go back and try something else. But the good news for us is that every possible kind of vaccine and every possible scenario is being investigated all at once. And that's why we have some confidence that one of these approaches is probably going to work, just because there's so many different approaches being evaluated all at the same time.
And is it true, people may not realize this, but there's more than one strain or type of coronavirus, correct?
That's true. And I spoke a bit about that today at the news conference. The virus that caused the SARS outbreak in 2003 is a member of the human coronavirus, as is the SARS-CoV-2 virus. SARS-CoV-2 is the actual name of the COVID-19 virus.
Right.
It's closely related to the SARS virus. In fact, that's where it got its name. These two viruses are so similar that we now know that antibodies to the SARS virus actually bind to the SARS-CoV-2 virus, or the COVID-19 virus. And what's exciting about that is that one vaccine might actually give you protection against multiple coronaviruses. And to me, that's exciting because there are 39 members of the larger coronavirus family. Many of them are in bats, and some of those have the same pandemic potential as the COVID-19 virus. So it may well be that this is not the last coronavirus we have to deal with. So the ability to make a vaccine that protects against multiple viruses is actually very exciting. And that data was just published recently.
And it's exciting because of the potential having this kind of breakthrough for the future and for future viruses, because this won't be the last. This won't be the last virus that we face, right?
Oh, absolutely not. We're just a few mutations away, quite honestly, from a major pandemic for flu again. I mean, it's very worrisome to the people who follow these things closely that we might have another influenza pandemic. Interestingly, flu viruses have a segmented genome. The genome is in 7 pieces, and they can shuffle. When two viruses get into the same cell, they can exchange pieces of their genomes, and a whole new virus can be created. And so that's one of the scary things about influenza, is that the deck could get shuffled, and we'd be facing another pandemic just like that.
Wow, unbelievable. And tell us, before we go to our first break, some of the research that's being done right there at Meharry.
So at the moment, we're studying 2 antivirals. The first is a compound that we were developing. One of my investigators, Dr. Alcindor, made a drug candidate that potently inhibited Zika virus. And given that the mechanism of infection of the Zika virus and coronaviruses are somewhat related, he changed the composition such that now this compound targets the COVID-19 virus. And that research is underway. There's also a drug that I've been working on this drug for many years for HIV. And likewise, there's similarities in how the virus goes into cells between COVID-19 and HIV. And we're investigating this other HIV drug candidate as a candidate for COVID-19. And so far, the data are very promising, and we're very excited about that.
And it's important to note, to clarify to our viewers as well, the difference. Obviously, there is a lot of movement and research being done and trials conducted, tests being conducted for a vaccine, but there are also some treatment protocols, and treatment is different from a vaccine. Treatment means something that can perhaps ease the symptoms and treat the patient once they are already contracted coronavirus, right?
Exactly. So the vaccine is a preventative way of keeping us protected. In fact, with a vaccine, the virus never has a chance to take hold in our bodies at all, because the immune system is ready to challenge it if we do get exposed to the virus. A therapeutic is something that we use when the virus has infected us to limit the disease it causes, or to slow it down and even prevent it from spreading. A great example is HIV. We still don't have a vaccine for HIV after 39 years of working on it. But we have therapeutics now that are so effective that they suppress the virus completely and not allow the virus to be spread from one person to another. It's called prevention by treatment. These drugs are so powerfully suppressive for HIV. They are literally undetectable when the drugs are on board. and it's become a widespread way of treating HIV, but it also prevents spreading of the virus because they're so.
Some of the notes I have here, I mentioned the first human trial data showing the first 8 patients all produced antibodies that could neutralize the virus. Also in Oxford, England, the first human trial in Europe has started with more than 800 recruits. They've signed a deal with AstraZeneca to supply 100 million doses if it works. Pharmaceutical giants Sanofi and GSK, that's GlaxoSmithKline, I believe, have teamed up to develop a vaccine. And in Australia, scientists have begun injecting ferrets with 2 potential vaccines. The first comprehensive preclinical trial involving animals. Researchers hope to test humans by the end of April. So with all of this going on around the world, you mentioned I have 80, but you said more than 100. How does everyone communicate with one another? I mean, these are private, public researchers all around the world. Is there a clearinghouse? Is there a way that everyone's communicating with each other?
There's not necessarily a clearinghouse, but one of the things I'm really excited about is a lot of these efforts you hear about are collaborative.
Right.
Scientists have galvanized globally to be focused on COVID-19. I think it's fair to say that many leading investigators studying other viruses and other vaccines kind of put those on hold to focus their attention on COVID-19. And the level of collaboration is really, really, for me, very exciting. For example, we're collaborating with scientists in Brazil. So there's a kind of a global network of collaboration where people are exchanging reagents, exchanging ideas. So a lot of the vaccine studies that you're talking about are in fact collaborations between multiple laboratories.
That's fantastic. All right, with that, we're going to take our first quick break, everyone, and a reminder to our viewers, phone lines are open. We would love to hear from you. If you have questions for Dr. Hildreth, if you have comments, maybe you or someone you know has had coronavirus, we'd love to hear from you. 737+. We'll be right back.